gender, I would be happy to answer on a private chat, Milda. After we finish this session, I will connect with you to go on this. I definitely agree with you, but just this session, I want to focus on the signatories. Ricardo is asking, do you have examples of policy of gender equality in this pandemic, like home office, childcare, etc.? Yes, UN Women and our team, we have worked very extensively and very deeply on how companies can still stick to gender equality and women's empowerment practices, but also how to support their own employees, women employees. So if I encourage you all to go to webs.org/resources. Actually, I would be very happy to do this together. And there you will be able to see all our resources that we have developed on and for to assist companies and the private sector, all their actions that we encourage them to take during the pandemic. Vielka is asking, what are the requirements to sign WEPs, and how long does it take to show in the web, and if there is a contact to ask. You can always ask and send questions on webs.org, and what we wait. No, I'm so sorry, my son is here. So sorry. So the requirement to sign the WEPs is to be a WEPs eligible company. So all private companies plus all private sector companies, private sector entities, chambers of commerces, and associations, they are eligible to sign for WEPs. It is very straightforward two-step action. One is the CEO statement. So all applications should begin with the signature of the highest person at the decision-making mechanism of a company. We call it CEO statement, of course, but it could be also the general manager. In some company, it could call regional manager or store manager. It should be the highest person that should sign physically the CEO statement. And there is a direct application on webs.org/join, where the companies should make their application online directly. How long does it take? It takes around 2 weeks, or it takes more. This is the time we are taking to process if all the information are giving are true, but we are also getting a due diligence process. And at the moment it is confirmed, it just shows automatically at the website. I have Ibrahim is asking, I have a projects where private sector companies are participating in the MENA region and would like to promote WEPs. Beautiful. Who do I get in touch within WEPs and UN Women to make the most of this? In all the countries, we have UN Women offices or regional offices or program offices. If not, you can just write to us and we can direct you to the person. So they will be very happy to be in contact with us. But also UNGC, they have their local network. I'm sure they will be also happy to show you how to practice the WEPs. So again, a lot of question on are there requirements for companies to join? The only requirement is to be eligible, as I said, a part of this, and to pass the due diligence. Ibrahim is asking again, can we encourage startup to join WEPs? Absolutely. About a year ago, we became more inclusive, and we are now accepting the companies with less than 10 employees, which was really the requisite for long years. So we are absolutely accepting the startups. So in 9 minutes, we will have our session, and with the participation of Sodexo and Swedbank and European Commission, and Anna Falk, the head of Women's Empowerment Principal Secretariat, will be more. So we encourage you all to join this session. And after this session, and I also encourage you to join our partner UN Global Compact session, which is on target gender equality, pathways to parity. That will begin at 2 p.m. Thank you, Eva. Eva is saying, great to be here. I can really recommend the webinars WEPs are organizing. Thank you very much. You can follow up all our program and on the events page of WEPs.org, but also on the events page and Twitter of WEPs and empowerwomen.org. And we are also putting the recordings there, so for a continuous learning experience. Any more questions? Mia is asking, do you have any recommendation on how to provide companies in the supply chain with support on how to successfully implement the WEPs? WEPs 5 and encourages all the companies to develop, establish gender-sensitive policies and practices all throughout their supply chain. And we are developing actually a guidance note that will be out latest in a month, and where we will have a step-by-step list on how the companies can successfully establish a gender-sensitive procurement. And also, we began developing a series of capacity-building videos on the implementation of the WEPs. So one of those capacity-building courses will be dedicated totally, entirely on the gender-sensitive procurement. These videos will be available between July till October. So we are also encouraging you to have a look and hopefully to take this course with us. Isabel has a great question. Do you have any advice for someone like me who wants their company to join but is not a senior in the company? So I think for the last 15 years, that is what was happening for the companies. They would allocate a small resource, employing a young girl to manage maybe a mini activity, probably access to finance or a breast cancer campaign or mini campaign. But now this is changing, and companies hopefully are much more aware. And we also all recognize that it is not possible to put all the weight of advancing gender equality on the shoulder of even one department of one person. So the buy-in of the senior management is a must. In our welcome package, so when all the companies, they become a member, they receive this welcome package. We put there, thinking about this, missing element, and for the companies, we are providing all the information you may need and the language you may need to use when talking to your senior management. So those are talking points, but also other assets. So if you're a signatory, I really recommend you to have a look at the welcome package. And again, if you need anything, we are here. Feel free to contact us. Janani is asking, what are the challenges to encourage companies to join WEPs in the present situation, and how can we overcome the challenges? So when we talk about present situation, I just assume we are talking about COVID-19, or we are talking about the general overall challenges on how to implement. So if the question is about how to encourage companies to join WEPs, outside there are over 70 or 80 studies today that proved the business case to implement gender equality and women's empowerment at the workplace. I'm talking about the business case. So of course, advancing gender equality and women's empowerment is something we have to do as a human right. But there is also a business case on that. And we cannot just imagine companies or private sector companies especially to close their eyes to this fact. There is enough studies to prove when there is, sorry. And when we do this, it is impossible. So we really encourage you. So you can also see what on the UN Women website, but also under the webs.org, we are giving all the resources available to you, where you can see under the resources all the business case studies, and our guidance note also is appropriate. Vielka is asking how they can access a training to promote WEPs. As I said, we will have an online learning that will be up from July on. And also, I know very well our Panama UN Women office is very much active on promoting WEPs. And they have already ongoing training on the WEPs, actually, that they will be happy to hear from you. Paloma is asking how the companies can be considered to be mentioned in the best practice section, and will this be conditioned on the information they upload on their WEPs profile page? So it's a step-by-step activity, I would say, on how we can have the case studies of best practice case studies. One, yes, we encourage, but also we ask all the companies to set up their company profiles page, which is totally straightforward, and it is a great visibility for them and for us to know better. But secondly, we ask them to fill up a gender action plan and to explain what are their policies and practices and how they are doing this. So after we revise this, we are contacting the companies and we are having interviews, and the preparation of the case studies became after that. So it is 1 o'clock. Our session will begin on WEPs. Thank you very much for all of you who joined this Q&A session on Women's Empowerment Principles. And now we are passing on our next session with Anna Falt. She just joined it. Hi, Anna. And who will moderate our session. She is the head of the WEP Secretariat, and also she is the manager of the We Empower G7 program funded by EU. And Hilde Hardeman, she is representing EU. Thank you so much, Hilde, for your time and even for joining the Q&A session and learning even more about WEPs. And Margot and Mari. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maral. I'm also looking to see if we have Anita on the line. It seems like we have Evelina, and I'm not sure if that is a nickname for our Anita, Deputy Executive Director of UN Women. But I think we'll start. I know that she is sitting in negotiations at the moment, so I will start the session, and I hope that after we hear from Hilde, that we will be able to start. Just a second. Okay, I was trying to see if I could record the session, and it doesn't seem to be recording yet. Just bear with me.
Anna, our colleagues are recording, but you're also welcome to record.
They are?
Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to be sure.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so welcome everyone to this session. It's about the women's empowerment principles, and thank you so much for laying a little bit of the background of the women's empowerment principles. This session is about recovering better, together, and stronger. And it's really been 10 years since UN Global Compact and UN Women, at the time UNIFEM, launched the Women's Empowerment Principles. At the time, we had 39 strong companies joining us and the CEO that had signed up to the principles. And today, we have about 3,150 more companies than we had at that time. It's a good road. Yes, I see Margaret. It's been a good road with Sodexo in the forefront, and also with Swedbank coming on later. But we need to make more. I mean, at this time, we hear from that it will take 257 years for us to close the gender gap in economic participation. What does that mean? It means that we will never be able to see gender equality in our lifetime. So we need to really step up and see how we can do this together. The Women's Empowerment Principles really lay the foundation for the work to implement gender equality and women's empowerment within the company, as we heard from Meral earlier, in the workplace, in the marketplace, and in the community. And unless we tackle all three areas, we will not be able to get the progress that we're looking for. And with the current crisis that we are in, it's really been showing, it's been a magnifier for inequalities, particularly gender inequalities. And so this is a good time for us to have this conversation, to really look at the Sustainable Development Goals, which the broader UN Global Compact Summit is tackling, but also the Women's Empowerment Principles that zoom in on on the SDG 5, on gender equality and women's empowerment. And they are really helping us as great platforms, global platforms, to respond to the crisis and to really lay the foundation for inclusive, participatory systems, ecosystems that brings in everyone and doesn't leave anyone behind. So I'm very happy to have Hilde Hardeman here. She is one of our supporters for the Women's Empowerment Principles. The European Union is supporting us through 3 programs. The We Empower G7, which we are leading from UN Women headquarters, but we also have the Win-Win program in Latin America, 7 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, and we also have the We Empower Asia that are being funded by the European Union, and we are very excited to have you here, Hilde. For those who don't know her, Hilde Hardeman is the head of the European Commission's Service for Foreign Policy Instruments. So Hilde, I will hand it over to you to give some opening remarks. Thank you so much. You need to unmute yourself, Hilde. You're currently muted. Yes, it's still being muted. How can I help you? Can anyone hear? No, no. I wish I could help you, Hilde.
Is this better?
Yeah, now
Yes, yes, perfect.
Does
Thank
this
you.
work?
Over to you. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay, good. All right. Well, all my thanks to UN Women for organizing this event. And I'm, of course, very proud that the European Commission Service for Foreign Policy Instruments, which I lead, can help make this event possible. And my special thanks and really hats off to all of you business leaders. Thank you for what you are doing every day again. Thank you for sharing your experience, and thank you for giving generation equality the wings to fly high. It is clear that we are stronger together. This is always true, but it is especially true when we are crossing a difficult, a rough patch like we are doing today across the globe. Stronger together is one of the motives that powers the European Union. And so is the motive and the objective of gender equality, which has been part of the Union's DNA from the very beginning. Imagine that a Treaty of Rome that was written in the 50s has a reference to gender equality. But very much remains to be done to achieve this objective fully and for all. The way in which the current pandemic is hitting women is making that once again crystal clear. We can only get there if we work together. That's why I'm really proud to represent the EU today, to highlight our alliance with the UN, and in particular with UN Women and with the ILO. Together we try to put into practice a series of actions worldwide, funded by the EU, in which we bring together our joint expertise and experience to empower women in the G7 countries, in Asia, in Latin America. And we all know it, COVID-19 has a gender bias. Look at its impact on women-owned businesses, on the burden women are facing during the crisis, at the death toll among women health workers, at the increase of gender-based violence. We owe it to all women, but especially to the women who are particularly hard hit during this crisis, to rebuild back better. And to do so, we must join forces. The private sector, business is crucial to make this happen. If we wish to see an economic recovery with women at its center, we need concrete tools and expertise for gender-sensitive business responses. Now, last week, we launched with ILO and UN Women the network of women entrepreneurs for Latin America and the Caribbean, a new tool to help women entrepreneurs share experiences, learn together, support and inspire each other. And it was really heartening to witness the vision, the capacity of women to deal with the unknown, the flexibility, the will to succeed despite all odds. With ILO, the enterprise self-assessment tool is up and running. It allows enterprises to recognize their own strengths and weaknesses on gender equality. And another tool still will allow the private sector to improve their performance on gender. So it's time to act, private and public sector together, making the most of the tools that we have available. The more the women empowerment principles are known to companies, the more these will commit and deliver, boosting both gender inclusive ways of working and business results and opportunities. So it's a true win-win. We must jointly spread the word. Your help is crucial. We count on you all. And you can count on the European Union. The EU is committed to continuing work with the private sector, as we are doing today, and through everything we undertake to ensure that we can bring generation equality into life into real life. So a fruitful event to us all, and I look forward to hearing your contributions and your ideas. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Hilde, for these remarks. And actually, as a reminder to us in the We Empower G7 program, that we are also going to have some activities for women entrepreneurs starting in July. So there will be more of these coming, not only for Latin America, but also for the G7. So I'm checking here. I don't see Anita in yet. I know she was busy with negotiations. So I think we'll start the conversation and then we'll bring Anita in when she arrives. Let me see, unless that is Anita that is joining us. Okay, so I'm going to mute that person that just joined. Okay, so we have a few questions to our web signatories. And I'd like to first introduce Margot Slattery.
Hi,
oh, we have
Anna.
Anita here.
I didn't want to
So let us hand over to Anita first before we start the conversation. Yeah. So Anita, we just heard from Hilde. She gave some really great opening remarks and also talking a little bit about our programs and our joint partnership together. So I would like to hand it over to you, Anita,
okay,
for some remarks.
Thanks very
so
much.
thanks for joining us.
Let me just adjust my camera a little bit to get the angles right. I'm really sorry I missed your remarks, Hilde, but I was having technology issues and was in a meeting prior to this one, which ran over a little bit late. But let me just start by saying good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you are. And really pleased, distinguished panelists and ladies and gentlemen, to be joining this panel today. I'd really like to start by thanking you, Hilde, for your remarks. I also would like to seize this opportunity to express my very deep and abiding gratitude to the EC for your investment of over 20 million euros in over 20 countries in the G7, in LAC, and in Asia, in women's economic empowerment, and your leadership on this issue and your underscoring of the importance of this issue through this support. Because for us, it's not just about funding, but about the signal that this sends about the value of this instrument. So thank you very much for that. We're really pleased to be part of the 2020 Leader Summit organized by UN Global Compact. 10 years ago, on 25th June 2010, in a UN Global Compact Leader Summit session, the Women's Empowerment Principles were launched. This is a joint initiative, as you all know, of UN Women and UN Global Compact. And at that time, 40 CEOs signed the first CEO statements. Well, it was actually 39, but I thought, I'd round up because it sounds a little bit better. This year, we are celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Women's Empowerment Principles. But more importantly, we are celebrating the efforts of those who have joined to advance gender equality in the workplace, in the marketplace, and through that in the community. By signing women's economic principles, companies galvanize their shareholders, their stakeholders, their employees, and their wider community to drive change for gender equality. And none of us can be blind to what is happening in the world today and the cataclysmic call for change that we are seeing on the streets of major capitals worldwide. If anything, these calls for change and justice just underscore the importance of community-led actions for improving outcomes of all sorts, ranging from racial injustice to gender equality. And companies that do this become role models for attracting talent, for entering new markets and serving their communities. It is crystal clear from what we have seen in the last week that companies have to be at the forefront of driving social change. And that is why there is so much attention being paid. And the reason I'm referring back to the zeitgeist is because it is telling us what is needed for companies to advance on gender equality. Because all of corporate America has had to take a very hard look at what is it doing to support or not support racial justice. So the same lens and the same level of scrutiny and the same degree of accountability is needed for companies to advance on gender equality. And I'm really happy to say that from that start, 10 years ago, today, we have over 3,100 companies committed to WEPs. I think we can feel very happy about this, but we can also say, ask ourselves, is this enough? And what more can we do? How big should our ambition be? And what should we be aspiring to? We are providing necessary tools and resources to our signatories to help them implement the principles all along different stages of their journey and to foster responsible business conduct, such as equal pay for equal work, gender responsive supply chain practices, ensuring zero tolerance for domestic violence, and others. And so today, I'm really pleased that we have with us two of promising signatories, Sodexo and Swedbank. The SDGs presented a vision of the world we want 5 years ago. And achieving gender equality, which is SDG 5, remains, I'm sorry to say, elusive. It is elusive and it is aspirational at best, because not one country in the world today has achieved gender equality. I think this is something that requires a lot of discussion. More importantly, it requires real action. And that's where the private sector role comes in. And what we're seeing is that the SDGs today are even more relevant than they were pre-COVID, because frankly, if we had invested in the SDGs and we had done what the SDGs were asking us to do, which is to invest in public health, which is to take risks seriously, which is to build up the capacity to serve and invest in the poorest communities, we would not have the results that we have today. We would have had much better outcomes coming out of the pandemic. But our failure to take action on the SDGs has actually resulted pretty much directly in some of the awful outcomes that we have seen through this pandemic. And we know that before the pandemic, there were mutually reinforcing crises of inequality. There is an intersectionality that we cannot ignore between the fact that women earn less, they save less, they have less secure jobs, and they're more likely to be in the informal economy, which means they have fewer protections. And we also know that for women in the formal economy, the burden of care falls disproportionately at women. You just have to look and see what is happening during the pandemic to see that women who are at home working, right, are also thinking about their children, the homework, the lunch, and everything else that goes with being the person who carries 3 times the burden of care relative to the partner in the household. So what the pandemic has done is it has shone a really sharp light on some of these existing inequalities and actually revealed the degree to which these injustices existed. For example, we've always known that there was domestic violence, but this pandemic showed us that there is actually a shadow pandemic of domestic violence, and it has just come to the fore because so many countries have reported calls and issues being flagged to them that are completely off the charts, right? So COVID-19 is a crisis. It is a threat to women's employment and livelihoods. we knew before COVID that even though we're celebrating Beijing's 25th anniversary this year, that we would not be reporting progress on all aspects of the Beijing platform. In fact, if we were having the Generation Equality Forum in July, as had been originally scheduled, we would be talking about the big gaps. And all that COVID has done is, A, to highlight really how big those gaps were, but to create renewed urgency, because not only were there gaps before the pandemic, what the pandemic risks doing is actually making these gaps bigger and actually reversing years of progress on gender equality. That is the single biggest risk to gender equality at the moment. And that is, not only were we facing practically insurmountable challenges before COVID started, now some of these have actually gotten worse. So what's the role of the private sector in all of this? What is the implication of this for every one of us and for the private sector? The private sector has already played an important role in not just slowing the spread of the virus, but also mitigating the impact of COVID on society at large. By and large, of course, I would say that the pandemic has shown the need for the role of the state and the role of the government to be much more of an enabler. But it has also shown that you need private and public partnerships in order for real systemic change. And during this time of tremendous upheaval and cataclysmic change, the women's economic empowerment principles for the private sector are a great resource because it can help them to protect the most vulnerable groups, those who are left behind, because it offers some standards, a framework for thinking about issues, a very clear framework on how to be gender inclusive across the value chain, whether it is in leadership, in the workplace, the marketplace, in the community, with suppliers, with distributors, with employees, with the world at large. And so we at UN Women really want to encourage, jointly with our colleagues at the UN Compact, companies, industry association, and chambers of commerce to join the WEPs community, because this can become a fundamental pillar of us building back better. The UN Secretary General has been talking about how the building back post-COVID must be based on resilience, must be based on the socioeconomic framework of the UN system, and must be based on addressing long-standing inequities that have been sharpened by COVID. So as we build back better and as we think about resilience, I would just, first like to commend all the business representatives who are here today for being really active and in promoting women's economic empowerment. Second, I would like to encourage them to set really high aspirational goals so that they can make transformative change in their workplaces and in their communities and implement the women's empowerment principles through an intersectional lens, looking at issues of justice and empowerment and equality. This will strengthen the brand as a business, and therefore we encourage firms of all sizes, shapes, and from all sectors to take on this agenda, but to take it on with a tremendous sense of urgency and with really decisive action that will allow us to enter the decade of action and create hope for achieving SDG 5 and justice in our lifetimes. I'll stop there. Thank you very much, and back to you, Anna.
Sorry, I think there is some. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so I wanted to say, Anita, that I can see from the comments in the chat box that you inspired a lot of our participants. So thank you so much for your great remarks. And we have today 2 companies with whom we've been working for a few years. We have Sodexo and we have Swedbank with us. And both of them, we've been working very closely to develop case studies. And we will go over a little bit of the journey of the 2 companies today to talk about not only the results, but we'd like to hear a little bit about what were the particular challenges and how can that help other companies to overcome those challenges. But I can say that from the 2 case studies that we have, there were 3 points really in common. It requires to make sustainable progress and over time, it really requires high-level leadership. And I think both companies pointed this out really strongly. The other one was having clear matrix and targets. So measuring progress and measuring results, it's key. Both companies pointed that out. And I think around the challenge, the common challenge was around instituting a gender-responsive culture everywhere. So, of course, it's a challenge when you are a multinational company and you have a presence in many different countries, how to harmonize across the board and how to institute this challenge, this culture that involves everyone, that is inclusive and gender-responsive across the board. But I think both companies were talking about how they were overcoming these challenges. So I'd like to first start with Margaret, maybe just some few introductory words around how you in Sodexo helped build a gender-balanced business. So Margaret is the Global Chief Diversity Inclusion Officer in Sodexo, and I'd like to welcome you to just give a little bit introduction of the journey. And I think your journey started already in 2009, so it's been quite an effort, and we are very thankful to you for creating gender equality within the company. So over to you, Margaret.
Thank you, Anna. And can you hear me okay? Yes. Okay, good. Excellent. I've had some technical difficulties today, so I was just hoping everything was all right. So it's great to join everybody here today, and thank you, Anita and Hilde, for the great remarks. They were really very inspiring. I'm stepping into the shoes of our former Chief Diversity Officer, Dr. Rohini Anand, and so a lot of this work and the heavy lifting has been done by Rohini and my colleagues. I'm relatively new, although I've been working and supporting in the background. A little bit of history around Sodexo and maybe a small bit of context setting. We were pre-COVID, because obviously COVID changes a lot of things, but we were about 470,000 people globally in the world in 70 odd countries, and we've been around as a business since 1966. And at the very beginning of Sodexo, our founder and entrepreneur called Pierre Bellon set out about seeing Sodexo as being a social accelerator and really about balance and fairness. So that was built in from the very beginning. I would say as every company grows and accelerates, you begin to see, what the challenges are. And our former CEO, Michel Landel, and Michel retired about 2 and a bit years ago. Michel in 2009 could see that as the company was growing and accelerating, that the gender balance was a challenge for us. So we had, probably going back all those years, a figure of about maybe 17% in senior leadership. So obviously, for the kind of growth we wanted, we needed to do something about that. So in 2009, and again, I'm giving you the shortened version, but in 2009, we set up a board, an advisory board to the CEO called SWIFT, which was Sodexo's Women's International Talent Forum. And that was made up of senior, mostly at the time, female leaders who advised and helped and supported our CEO to find some tactics and some ways of some big changes. And this had 2 sponsors who reported directly to the CEO and were on our comics And Rohini, who I mentioned, was a big, big part of that and was one of the key leaders about making that change. But most importantly, our then CEO, Michelle, and the team accelerated that. And maybe perhaps would I take you on that journey? In 2015, Michelle signed the WEPs, and today Dini Meshwell, who is our current CEO, is again a very big supporter of that change. So it is a continuum in Sodexo and something that's very much supported. And if you read the case study, you will see our changes and our improvement in those figures. So for 2025, we have a figure of 40% women in senior leadership, and we're certainly well on our way to that. So Anna, that's just a very quick tour de force. I can certainly talk more, but I obviously want to give an opportunity for the others.
Thank you, Margot. I think from Mara Heinlut from Swedbank, we will hear a slightly different story. It's been focusing on equal pay. So just a quite brief introduction. Mara, over to you.
Thank you. Compared to Sodexo, I'd say, yeah, we are a bit of a smaller company. We only have 15,000 employees. And to think on where did our journey start with gender equality and equal pay and all that, then I think it's even quite difficult to pinpoint, because being a Swedish company and also identifying ourselves as the bank for the many, then this is such a natural part of our being. But of course, really achieving great results in this has been the result of really focused work. And we really kickstarted that back in 2013, 2014, when we set really clear goals of gender equal representation in senior management and equal pay as well to work on, which we have achieved by now. And but as nothing in this area is really self-maintaining or can be taken for granted, then maintenance really requires conscious work and continuous work all the time as well. So we are constantly on the journey to become even better at this, and making sure we are creating an environment that is equal to all and inclusive to all.
Thank you so much. So to both of you, what were the main challenges and roadblocks? I mentioned a little bit earlier the culture, which I picked up from your case studies, but maybe you can go into a little bit deeper on what were the specific challenges. Mara, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So our case study was about equal pay and how we achieved making sure that we are paying men and women working the same jobs equally. And I think at first we had the idea, the illusion that it will help if we just close the gaps once. We close the gaps and then you look at the statistics again in a little bit of time and see that they are back. So the understanding that this is something that we must work on continuously, that this is something that we need to integrate into everything that we do with people, the salary reviews, the PD evaluations, assessments of people, and the everlasting awareness raising and training of managers. It really, I think that was the first moment where we realized that this work is never really over and that we need to integrate it into everything. But I think once we realized that, then we understood that this was something that we needed to do, and it really even expands past only questions related to pay, but how do you make sure that all your people processes are not discriminatory against anyone? Because that is actually something that the Swedish law requires us to look at and work proactively with each year. We need to analyze all our people processes and investigate whether there is potential direct or indirect discrimination. So it's an ongoing work, and that is a challenge in itself.
Thank you, Mara. So, Marga, do you agree with this is not a quick fix to work on gender equality? What are your main challenges in SEDEX?
Sorry, Anna. Didn't mean to interrupt. Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I think Mari's picked up some really good points. It's a journey, and many people use that, to talk about something, but truly it is. I think for us, probably the very first one that we encountered, the very first roadblock, was around the complexity and the size of our organization. So you can have an aspiration, you can want to do something, but then how do you get it out to your colleagues, to 70 odd countries, so many different cultures, so many different, and then we have all different businesses. And a really big part of that, overcoming that obstacle was our CEO's dedication. So Michelle, and as I said now, Denis, it was that sense that they role modeled, they talked about it. It was a constant. So that's incredibly important. Then obviously you've got to take into account, different countries and how and when they are ready, and when the business is ready. So, for instance, I know that because my former role was I was the CEO of our business in the Republic of Ireland. You can probably tell by the accent, but I had to wait till the business was ready and they understood what happened. So just because I wanted to do it as the CEO, I had to make sure that we've made improvements in our processes and our practices. So again, like you said, Mari, it's no point doing just one thing if all the other parts are, there needs to be a systematic approach. So I would say that's also one of the challenges. And then probably just the belief of the leaders in each country, because the CEO might role model, the CEO might talk about it, but again, you need to make sure that our leaders don't just do it because it's a tick box exercise. They've got to believe in about it. So again, it was making sure we challenged bias, we challenged thinking, and got people to believe and to really become, if you like, disciples about this way of doing business. And now we have 57 countries with Sodexo who have actually signed the WEPs. So again, that's evidence of that change. And maybe the last point I would talk to is we did a gender balance case study in 2014 and 2018. And again, I think this really helped. So that was in 50 different entities. And we looked at a 60-40 balance. So some countries were 60, some were 40. It depended and mixed between the two of male and female leadership. What was really evident was in those 50 entities, we saw everything that we were measuring. So, our P&L, all the different points, our engagement, our EBITDA, all of these were better than those countries that didn't have that balanced leadership. So again, the business case was really clear. So when we talked to countries, we were able to demonstrate that. So having challenges, yes, but also having ways of overcoming them are very important. Thank you.
Great. So I think you pointed to a few enablers. So we heard from Mara that, of course, the Swedish law helped them along to also set the same standard in the other countries where you operate. And we heard, also earlier from Anita that public-private partnerships are key to success. And I think that's where the private sector and governments can work in synergy to advance this agenda. And we also heard about the leadership is key. And just from a previous conversation today in the summit, we had Clark Murphy talking about the multi-level systems thinking, that you need to have it. You need to have a mindset of doing this so that it actually happens everywhere in the company, that it's not just trying to fix it in one place. And if you don't have that DNA of inclusion and diversity and gender equality, you might miss it in other parts. But I want to get to see if there are anything else that can help other companies to, if they're in a country that are not necessarily having a strong legislation and their CEO might not be that sustainability mindset person, like what are the other enablers that that we can pick up on that really kind of helped? I mean, it's difficult when you had very strong CEOs on your own and you had that backing with the legislation, but is there something that you would like to add to this as great enablers for change? It could be, I read in one of them that it doesn't have to be top down, it can also be bottom up type of work. And if you want to elaborate a little bit more on how that can happen. And that was a question that we had earlier as well from a young woman who said that if I'm young, I'm not the CEO, what can I do to kind of push this agenda in my company? So who wants to start? Margaret? Yeah.
I didn't want to jump ahead, but sorry.
No,
I think particularly one initiative that we've done over a number of years now. So when we, and it really kind of talks to the question. So when we do something around International Women's Day, we kind of moved away from just highlighting and telling the story. Of course, that's incredibly important, and highlighting the challenges. But we looked to doing something very practical. And one of the things was we put in place a process, or I suppose a really good idea called She Works. And the initiative is a job shadowing program. So basically for a one day, and might be a couple of days, a Sodexo employee, hopefully at a manager level, because we want people to support the people who are coming up, gives an opportunity for somebody outside, usually coming from perhaps disadvantaged, from the community, to job shadow them and to get involved. And we have found this has happened now, you know, over the last 4 or 5 years. We particularly have driven it over the last 2 or 3, and it picks up some of the key principles. Some of those people might come from supplier base. They may, you know, they come from the wider community, from partnerships, etc. But what we've seen is that our managers and our people on site really, they see the evidence of the work we're doing in that, and the feedback has been excellent. And actually, some of those people have joined us as employees. So again, it's been an opportunity to recruit talent, to get people into the organization, but to visibly demonstrate the work we're doing around gender. And maybe just the second point I would talk to, again, I talked about in the beginning when we did something called SWIFT, which was that Senior Women's Advisory Panel. We now have called it So Together. So we've both women and men in it. And again, a broad spectrum of people across the business who talk to this. So it's not just the leaders. So when we talk about it being in the DNA, these people take it back to the business. They're feeding it back, and it's cyclical. It keeps challenging and changing. So those are just some from us, Mari.
Great, thank you, Mara.
Mm-hmm. To really answer the question from the person who asked, what do I do if I'm not the CEO and I'm a young person? So, well, I think the truth remains that in order to really inspire change within a company, you need to get the leadership on board. But how to do that, I think I would advise you to really equip yourself with some research, with some knowledge, and request a meeting and talk about the how and why. Because I think we are so good at talking about how things should be, how things should look like, how there should be gender equality, and how there should be equal pay, but the real sort of solutions are sometimes lacking from the conversation. So I would really advise to be solution-oriented and talk about the why. If you are somebody within a company that wants to sort of bring this in a company, and also talk about the why, because I mean, we are all professional people. We are well-meaning managers and leaders, but sometimes we still make biased decisions about people and wrong decisions. So we need to talk about the very human reason why we do that, and that is the unconscious bias, and that we should really consider how that affects our decision making. And I have found that personally to be one of the greatest ways to get on board even the people that in the first at first are perhaps not entirely sharing your view on things. So yeah, the how and the why.
Thank you very much. There's a few comments. I'm trying to keep up with the speed of the comments coming in. But Milda is definitely agreeing with you that awareness is extremely important, because then people and leaders will embrace the change and become change agents more likely. So, but I like also what you said about being solution oriented. This is also one of the reasons that we are creating this case studies, is really to kind of give ideas to other companies on what can be done. And today we have two quite different companies with us to be able to see the work of a multinational that has 57 signatories. I don't know how many, Margot, how many more you have to go. I think it's about 13 more to go. Yeah. To get into the 70+ country operations that you have. And also Swedbank, that is a more regional operating bank. So that's to kind of give everyone some ideas. But I'd like to see if there are any comments or questions people want to share at this point. There has been a lot of questions around how do I join? How do I access these case studies? So we've had them shared on the screen. But I'd like to see if there's any concrete questions to the panelists at this point. So Isabel is thanking you for answering all the questions that she had earlier. And she's excited to start getting this going in her company. And I'm going to see if there is any other questions. Okay, so we'll. I have a question. So, what would be your one recommendation to other companies to advance in their gender equality journey? So we talked about the CEO buy-in. We talked about some the job shadowing. It seems really interesting. I wish I had that when I was young to be able to explore new opportunities. We talked about the how to overcome some roadblocks and to be driven by solutions, but also have a clear business case, why this matters to this particular company. And I really like the name Sew Together, because it kind of says that it's not a one person's job, but it's a whole company's effort and the entire network that you have. So did we miss something? We also talked about not a quick fix, that it's a continuous journey that we need to monitor. What else would you like to add to this? And we have from Monica, what are the challenges that you encounter on the journey, and how can you inspire other corporations to do the same? So it's kind of a similar, how do you inspire them, and what kind of key recommendations would you have?
So maybe I'll start. I would say, you know, just some additional things that we haven't maybe spoken to are what's really important is the partnership with other parts of your company and the other functions of your organization. So for us, communications were absolutely key, because you need to be able to communicate this widely. It's got to be communicated, perhaps, you know, we talked about cultural challenges. It's got to be communicated a little bit differently in some parts of the business. And to make sure that that communication is really clear. So again, it's not just the leader, it's wider than that. I think HR were a really big part of that. So our HR team, so D and I just can't drive that, or the leadership. Our HR business partners, our directors were important in making that happen. And just to make sure it trickles down. So if you've got affiliates all over the world in different types of business, how the message is cascaded and communicated is incredibly important. And I think it's important not to ignore that, because it can really be, you can stop very quickly and be pulled up on your journey if that's not taken account of.
So Margaret, before we hand over to Mara, we have 3 other questions. So I'd like to give you an opportunity to also take those into account. And Hilde Hardeman, she's still with us. She just is in hiding, with not on camera. She's asking what would be the most single important thing that you would expect from your governments and from the European Union. The other one is, what is the one initiative or intervention that you felt made the biggest impact on moving the needle on the numbers? We also have Milda asking if there's anything in place in your organizations to tackle inequality among people who do not identify themselves in terms of binary gender definition. For example, trans people are much less likely to be hired and experience more inequality at work. And yeah, that's it for now. So if there's any of those you want to tackle, otherwise, I know it's a mouthful, but if there's any of those that you'd like to address before I hand over to Mara.
Okay, and I'll try to do that rather quickly. So you might have guessed, as I said at one stage by the accent, I'm living and based in the Republic of Ireland, although working globally, at the moment in one room for 3 months, but however, but when you ask about government, and I see it very much in evidence here as Irish person, member of the European Union, it's very important that our government, when I was in my CEO role and I'm trying to drive through gender equality, it was very important that the government is also speaking to this. So the government in Ireland has targets, has set some really good, if you like, a roadmap out about what it wants to do around gender equality, and then has engaged in, if you like, an initiative called Better Balance, which is all about drawing in leaders and businesses into this. So it's not just your company, you're not alone. And I attended a lot of workshops and helping and systems and sessions that really kind of made me feel that as a business, I was joining something that had a tide about moving forward rather than back. So I think governments have to lead, they have to draw business in, and they need to, if you like, to set some targets for business as well. I don't think governments, can be an inactive actor. They have to be a very active actor. I'm trying to remember the second question. The third question, I can come back to the second one if I can remember, but the third question was around those who are non-binary. So in our organization, we have set out 5 areas around discrimination and many others, to be honest with you, and obviously taking into account all those countries and the equality legislation, but particularly around sexual orientation. We've set out that equality in everything we do is the same for those who are coming from every part of the LGBTI plus groups. So if you're non-binary, then you have exactly the same access to information and rights as everybody else. So, and obviously what we're trying to do is globally make sure, taking into account the different legislation in the different countries and the kind of questions we can ask, we're trying to understand how people identify and to try to help and support that as well. But equality for all is our standard bearer. And maybe perhaps you can remind me the middle question. I'm trying to remember what it was.
Yeah, we're running short of time, so I thought maybe Mara, you could also take that one. What is the one initiative or intervention that you felt made the biggest impact on moving the needle on the numbers?
Answering that question, it was definitely the zero tolerance for any equal pay gap for men and women working in the same position, and really putting in place a system where we have evaluated all the jobs. We have set a salary range for all the jobs, and the people working that job should adhere to that range. And also we are looking into those ranges and the salaries that people are actually receiving, and comparing men and women's salaries there. So that putting that system in place and tracking it and holding people accountable for their decisions when it comes to salary, really, I think made the biggest impact. And with the same answer, actually, I would answer the question from Hilde and the question of what we would expect from the government or the European Union. I think it would really benefit everybody if there was more explicit equal pay legislation, because at the moment the European Union is talking a lot about the gender pay gap, and I think the distinction between the gender pay gap and equal pay actually is very difficult in people's minds, and they are sort of cross-using those terms and the arguments for those terms. So there are some companies that are a bit more forward in that. They are requesting companies to actually compare the same jobs, but on not such a broad scale. And if the sort of the public space conversation is a lot about the gender equal pay, but then or the gender pay gap, and then the companies are looking at their statistics and they're not seeing the same sort of large gaps as the gender pay gap is being communicated, then there's this cognitive dissonance where people don't understand what we're really talking about anymore. So I'm thinking that if we spoke more about equal pay and really required companies to measure how they are paying men and women working the same job, then that could be a real progress.
Great.
Difficult one.
Hilde, thank you so much, Mara. Hilde, you put your camera back. Would you like to say some final words? I know it wasn't in the planning, but would you like to add something to the conversation?
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes,
I
yes.
would like to say that this was very enriching, very interesting, very inspiring, and with all the ideas that we've heard today, ideas that relate to real life that you have put into practice, I think that many around the world can think how concretely they can do something, both in general and in particular in this period of building back better, to do justice to all the women around the world who look forward to a better future, to make sure that generation equality really becomes reality. That's what I would like to say. Thank you all. I found it very interesting, and I hope that we can do this again in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hilde. For sure, we'll continue these conversations. There's a lot of lessons to be learned from our amazing web signatories. And I would like to thank everyone today. There has been a lot of questions, and I just recommend each and every one of you that have continuous questions, either for the panelists or for us in UN Women or for the European Union or for the Global Compact, to just send us an email to weps@unwomen.org. And I see that there's interest in getting in touch with us in Africa, in Kenya, etc. And we can do so. If you just send us an email, we'll be in touch. And I'd just like to, there's a link from the UN Global Compact. And actually now at 2 o'clock, there's a session starting on gender equality. This session is about target gender equality, pathways to parity. And it starts now. You have the link there. You can just click on it and continue the conversation about gender equality. And thank you so much. Thank you, Hilde. Thank you, Margaret and Mara, for your participation today. And thank you so much, everyone, for your very productive questions. And we'll be in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.